Have you ever heard of a place so sacred, so still, that even the walls seem to whisper prayers? Now imagine this, a monastery cloaked in silence, where no man is allowed to enter. A sisterhood bound by vows of chastity, obedience, and secrecy. Then, one cold dawn, a newborn's cry breaks the silence. A child, born inside the cloister, and no one, not even the abbess, claims to know how. Who was the nun? How did a life begin where life was never supposed to exist? And what price did she pay? In the misty hills of 14th century France, where monastery walls clung to ancient rock like secrets to the soul, there stood an abbey few dared approach without reverence. The Abbey of Saint Cecile, isolated among whispering woods and echoing stone paths, was a place of devotion, silence, and the strictest of discipline. To the outside world, its gates symbolized a doorway to purity and spiritual detachment from worldly corruption. But behind those ivy-wrapped walls, an incident unfolded that sent ripples through church courts, royal halls, and even quiet village homes. A nun, cloistered in a world where silence was holy and flesh was temptation, had given birth to a child. No records explained how. No outsider was ever seen entering, and no man claimed the child. How could such a thing happen in a world so tightly controlled? Who was this woman of God who bore a secret so profoundly human? And what did the church do when faced with a miracle or a scandal it could not explain? These are the questions that hung in the air like incense, unanswered and half-whispered for centuries. The story begins not with the birth itself, but with the woman who would later become the center of one of medieval France's most whispered tales. Before she was Sister Isabeau, she was simply Isabeau of Lune, a miller's daughter born to the cold banks of the River Lot. Her village was a small speck on the map, a place where time moved with the rhythm of harvests and prayers. Her mother died young, and her father, a stern but God-fearing man, encouraged her to find safety and salvation in the arms of the church. Isabeau was not extraordinary by appearance. She had plain brown eyes, an unremarkable face, and a quiet manner, but she listened with great intensity. When the village priest read from scripture, she memorized entire passages after a single hearing. When storms came, and at 13, she was sent to the Abbey of Saint Cecile. Her father donated a full sack of grain and 3 silver coins, all he had, for her dowry. The abbess accepted her without ceremony. Isabeau entered the abbey as a novice, her hair shorn, her name changed, her past buried beneath the weight of vows she had not yet made. Life in the abbey was ordered and absolute. Bells marked each hour of prayer, study, labor, and sleep. The nuns grew herbs, copied manuscripts, and tended to the poor who came to the gate for bread. They rarely spoke unless spoken to. Each sister took a vow of silence for parts of the day, and even during communal meals, conversations were limited to scripture readings or spiritual reflection. Isabeau adapted quickly. She was obedient, modest, and contemplative. Within 5 years, she had taken full vows. She became Sister Isabeau of the Quiet Heart. Her assigned role was that of an illuminator, one who decorated the sacred texts with tiny gold-leafed paintings of saints, vines, and angels. Her work was praised, and even visiting bishops admired the delicacy of her art. But there was something unusual about her. She had visions. At first, she kept them secret. Then, during a midnight prayer, she collapsed and claimed to have seen Saint Margaret holding a burning lily. The abbess at the time, Mother Odile, believed her. For the next year, Isabeau was given spiritual guidance and fewer physical tasks. Her visions continued, some beautiful, some terrifying. And in one vision, she said a child would be born within the walls of the abbey. Nobody believed that part. In the winter of 1347, the Black Death had not yet touched their region, but fear drifted like fog. Pilgrims stopped traveling. The abbey tightened its rules. Nuns who once tended the gates were now forbidden to interact with outsiders. The scriptorium, too, was closed for several weeks due to illness among the illuminators. During this time, Sister Isabeau was rarely seen. Records later showed she was kept in the infirmary, treated for an unspecified fever of the womb. The infirmarian, Sister Agnes, claimed Isabeau had complained of swelling, pain, and nausea. Some suspected she had a tumor. Others whispered darker things. Then one cold night in February, screams were heard. 3 nuns were present, all sworn to silence. The abbess later testified before an ecclesiastical court that Sister Isabeau had delivered a male child, alive, with great pain, yet without dying. The child was small, quiet, and bore a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon. Sister Agnes tried to baptize him immediately, fearing he might die, but the child lived. The next morning, the abbey bell did not ring. No prayers were sung. The entire convent went into a silent lockdown. A message was sent to the Bishop of Cahors. Within days, church investigators arrived. The child was gone. The church handled such scandals with careful deliberation. A woman under holy vows found with child was a theological crisis. If the child was conceived by sin, she had broken her vows. If it was by force, someone had entered the abbey. If it was by miracle, then it was a sign from God, or worse, a deception. Isabeau was questioned for days. Her answers were quiet but firm. She claimed she had never lain with a man. She said she had seen an angel. She spoke of fire in her womb. The bishop called her mad. A physician examined her and declared that she had definitely been pregnant. But how? There were no male staff. The abbey walls were too high. No records of visitors. No signs of violence. No trail to follow. The sisters refused to speak further. The abbess insisted the child had been taken to a foundling home. Yet no such record existed. Isabeau was found guilty of breaking her vows through unexplained conception. The sentence was unusually light. She was not excommunicated, but sent into isolated penance in a distant hermitage. But her story did not die. Whispers followed her for decades. Some said the child had become a monk with visions of his own. Others claimed the child vanished entirely. A few dared say the child bore a divine gift. What really happened during that month of silence? Was it a cover-up of abuse? A true miracle? Or a tale crafted to hide something far more complex? These questions lead us to the next part of Isabeau's life, a life lived in shadows, where truth and legend intertwined. The air in the abbey grew heavy with an unspoken dread. As Father Matteo, a Dominican friar from the city of Siena, arrived with the authority of Rome itself, his presence was a tangible shift, an arrival not marked by celebration, but by silent fear. Father Matteo was lean and stern, his eyes sharp and observant, trained over years to detect the faintest trace of sin. He carried not only the weight of church doctrine, but the burden of delivering justice in a world where faith and fear intertwined. His task was clear: to investigate the scandal of Sister Benedetta and her child. Yet beneath the surface, the truth was elusive, tangled in layers of secrecy, fear, and unspoken prayers. Father Matteo's investigation began quietly, in the dim corners of the abbey's library. He pored over the ledgers, letters, and records kept by the abbey's scribes. The medical logs from the infirmary told a subtle tale. mentions of faint fevers and sudden illnesses that coincided with Benedetta's hidden pregnancy. Summoning the abbess, Caterina, Father Matteo requested a full account. Caterina, a woman hardened by years of leadership and ecclesiastical politics, answered plainly yet with visible fatigue. Benedetta had been a model nun, obedient, silent, devout, until her sudden collapse during morning prayers. No one had suspected her condition. No midwife had been called. No questions asked. The trial that followed was less a public spectacle than a slow, suffocating examination of faith and doubt. Benedetta was brought before Father Matteo, bound but serene. He pressed her for answers. Was she guilty of sin? Could she name the Father? Each question was met with silence or simple, unyielding truths. "No man touched me," she said quietly. "I bear no sin, only truth." Her words confounded the inquisitor, who was trained to see the world in black and white. Sinner or saint, guilty or innocent, as Father Matteo questioned the other nuns, inconsistencies and shadows appeared. Sister Lucrezia, the infirmarian, recalled faint traces of blood months before. Sister Agnes spoke of Benedetta's restless nights and whispered prayers. An anonymous testimony spoke of seeing Benedetta walking under the moonlight, hands pressed to her belly, singing softly. Each detail painted a picture both fragile and enigmatic, a young woman caught between devotion and mystery. The trial's outcome was as ambiguous as the events themselves. Benedetta was confined, neither condemned nor absolved, sentenced to live in seclusion for the rest of her days. The child was taken away, hidden from the world, raised in silence. The abbey's rhythms continued, but the shadow of the trial lingered, etched into the stone walls, whispered in prayers, carried in the heavy silences. Historians looking back at the trial find more questions than answers. Was Benedetta a victim or a miracle? Did she hide a painful secret, or was she touched by divine grace? Her trial remains a testament to the complexities of faith, justice, and human understanding in a time when silence could be both sanctuary and prison. The arrival of Father Matteo was like a sudden shadow cast over the abbey's already dim corridors. He came from Siena, a city known for its strict adherence to church orthodoxy and its wary eye on anything that might threaten its order. His journey to the abbey was long and solitary, traversing narrow mountain paths and misty valleys. Accompanying him was only a small retinue of scribes and attendants, ensuring that his mission would proceed with the utmost discretion. Upon entering the abbey, his presence was immediately felt. The nuns, who had grown used to their cloistered routine, found their calm fractured. Eyes lowered, hushed whispers floated through the halls, and the usual prayers were spoken with an added weight of tension. Father Matteo did not seek comfort or welcome. His purpose was singular: to find the truth, whatever it might be. His first order of business was to speak with the abbess, Caterina, who bore the heavy responsibility of the convent's well-being. Caterina, a woman of sharp mind and steely resolve, met Father Matteo in the abbey's small council chamber. The room was austere, with only a wooden table and a few chairs, illuminated by the soft light filtering through stained glass. She recounted the events leading to Sister Benedetta's collapse, the sudden fainting during morning prayers, the secret birth, the shock and confusion that followed. Though her voice was calm, her hands betrayed her, trembling ever so slightly as she laid out the story. Father Matteo listened, eyes narrowed, occasionally jotting notes in a leather-bound book. When Benedetta was finally brought before him, the weight of the moment pressed heavily on all present. The young nun stood silent and composed, her eyes lowered but resolute. Bound by linen cords, not as punishment, but as a symbol of her seclusion. She faced the man who held her fate. Father Matteo questioned her gently but firmly. "Do you deny your child's birth?" "No," she replied, her voice steady. "Can you tell me who is the father?" "No, Father." "Has any man touched you during your time at the abbey?" "No." Her answers, simple yet profound, unsettled the inquisitor. Father Matteo then turned to the other nuns for testimony. Their accounts were cautious, sometimes contradictory. The infirmarian, Sister Lucrezia, admitted to noticing faint signs, small stains of blood, moments when Benedetta seemed ill but never revealed her condition. Sister Agnès recalled restless nights, prayers whispered in the dark, and Benedetta's strange habit of walking alone beneath the moonlight. An anonymous report hinted at secret meetings. But no clear evidence emerged. The puzzle grew more complex with each testimony. Behind the scenes, church officials debated the theological implications. Could a nun conceive without sin? Was such a birth a miracle, a deception, or a sin punished by divine law? The answers were anything but clear. The doctrine held that chastity was absolute. Any breach was a grievous sin, punishable by excommunication or worse. Yet centuries of apocryphal stories told of virgins who bore children by divine will, miracles that defied human logic. The church faced a dilemma: to punish in silence or to protect a mystery beyond understanding. In the end, the verdict was a compromise steeped in ambiguity. Benedetta was confined to a remote hermitage, isolated but alive. Her child was taken from her, raised in secrecy. The church sealed records and discouraged discussion. The abbey was left to bear the burden of silence. The chill of early spring settled over the valley like a thin veil, brushing the ancient stones of the Abbey of St. Cécile with dew and quiet. The once bustling cloisters now hummed with a muted rhythm, a delicate dance between memory and forgetting. Sister Benedetta was gone from the abbey, confined to a distant hermitage where the nuns spoke little of her and less of the child she bore. But the silence she left behind was heavy and tangible. Outside the thick walls, the world kept turning. Kings and popes grappled with power and heresy, while peasants toiled through endless cycles of sowing and harvest. Yet, in small villages scattered across the French countryside, the tale of the nun who gave birth in the monastery blossomed quietly into legend. Official records scarcely mention Jean, the child born under the shroud of mystery. A baptismal note, written hastily by a local priest months after the birth, marked the beginning of the boy's life outside the abbey. Jean, foundling of unknown origin, it read simply, marked by God's crescent on his shoulder. The orphanage where Jean was placed was a humble establishment, run by a sisterhood dedicated to caring for abandoned and orphaned children. Its stone walls were worn and stained by the passage of decades, its hearths always warm, but never grand. Jean grew in the shadows of whispered prayers and the watchful eyes of caretakers who knew better than to ask questions. The other children never quite understood his silence or the strange mark that set him apart. As Jean grew, stories began to trickle through the village. Some claimed he had the calmness of his mother, a steady gaze that seemed to pierce through lies and falsehoods. Others whispered of strange dreams he had, dreams of light, fire, and voices only he could hear. One local miller, who often passed the orphanage on his way to work, swore he saw the boy speaking quietly to a figure clad in white robes, a vision no one else seemed to see. Jean never spoke of these visions, but those who cared for him noticed his nights were restless and his mornings distant. Despite his strange nature, Jean learned to read and write, taught by a kindly monk from a nearby abbey who visited regularly. The boy's intellect blossomed, his hands as deft at turning parchment as they were at comforting the other children. Back at the Abbey of Saint Cecile, life was irrevocably altered. The chapel built near the room of Jean's birth became a small pilgrimage site for those who sought miracles. Candles flickered day and night. Prayers whispered for the soul of the child and the woman who bore him. Yet the abbey itself remained cloaked in secrecy. The sisters' lives were marked by a heavier silence, a deeper devotion born not only of faith, but also of guilt and fear. The abbess who had presided over the scandal, Caterina, spent her last years in solitude, her health failing as though burdened by the unseen weight of history. The story of Sister Benedetta and her child stirred ripples far beyond the abbey's walls. Within the councils of the church, debates arose. Was this a miracle, a sin, or something altogether different? Theologians pored over ancient texts, apocryphal stories, and legends of saints who conceived without mortal fathers. Some argued that Benedetta was a vessel of divine will, touched by the Holy Spirit in a way that defied understanding. Others were less charitable, viewing her as a sinner whose punishment should be severe. The Pope himself received letters on the matter, but wary of scandal, he decreed silence and ordered that the matter be sealed in the church's archives. Centuries passed, and the story of the nun who gave birth faded from official history, but lived on in folktales and whispered legends. Villagers spoke of a mysterious child marked by a crescent, a boy who grew up between worlds, neither fully part of the church nor the secular world. Local bards composed songs, mothers told their children tales of faith and mystery, and pilgrims continued to visit the chapel, leaving tokens of hope and questions unanswered. Was Sister Benedetta a victim of a hidden abuse that the church suppressed? Was Jean truly the child of a divine miracle? Or was the story a carefully constructed veil to hide a scandal that no one dared name? No records survive to provide a definitive answer. The journals found decades after her death speak of visions and truths too complex for the time. The abbey walls still hold their silence, broken only by the prayers of those who seek answers in the space between faith and doubt. What do you believe truly happened behind the stone walls of the Abbey of Saint Cecile? Was it a miracle, a tragedy, or something in between? History rarely offers clear answers, but the search itself can deepen our understanding of faith, humanity, and the mysteries of the past. After the church's verdict, Sister Benedetta was removed from the abbey and sent to a remote hermitage deep within the woods, near the borders of the diocese. The hermitage was a modest stone building, surrounded by towering oaks and shrouded in mist most mornings. It was isolated, both a place of punishment and penance. Here, Benedetta lived out her days in relative solitude. The nuns who accompanied her were tasked with monitoring her movements, ensuring she remained within the confines of the hermitage and refrained from speaking of her past. Communication was limited to prayers and necessary daily tasks. Yet in these quiet years, some writings hint at a transformation within Benedetta. Though her voice was silenced by decree, her mind and spirit seemed to wander realms beyond the physical walls. Fragments of letters written by visiting monks speak of visions she described, of celestial lights, voices of angels, and a child cradled in the heavens. These writings, however, were quickly confiscated by church authorities. They remain in the Vatican's secret archives, inaccessible to most historians. Meanwhile, Jean's life unfolded under different shadows. The orphanage where he was placed was managed by the Sisters of Mercy, a lesser-known but devoted order specializing in caring for abandoned children. Jean was a quiet boy, reserved but observant. Caretakers noted his remarkable calmness even in the face of hardship, a trait his mother shared, according to surviving testimonies. As he grew into adolescence, Jean exhibited a curious intellect, excelling in reading, writing, and learning Latin, the language of the church and scholarship. Some villagers recounted seeing Jean wandering near the abbey ruins, touching the stone walls as if seeking connection to a forgotten past. Others whispered that he was different, not merely because of his birthmark, but because of a profound sadness that lingered behind his eyes. Jean's crescent-shaped birthmark became a symbol shrouded in multiple interpretations. To some, it was a divine sign, an emblem of the Virgin Mary, often depicted with a crescent moon beneath her feet. To others, it was a mark of otherworldly origin, a token of a hidden destiny. Curiously, in rare instances, Jean was observed to trace the mark during moments of deep contemplation, as if drawing power or comfort from it. His story, though fragmentary, echoes that of many historical figures born under mysterious circumstances, those caught between faith and legend, history and myth. Back within the abbey, the years passed, but the shadow of the birth lingered. The nuns lived under the dual burdens of devotion and unspoken guilt. The abbess, who succeeded Caterina, sought to steer the convent back to spiritual purity, yet even she understood that some wounds were slow to heal. The abbey's chronicles reflect a subtle shift, a newfound emphasis on silence, penance, and vigilance. Priests visiting the abbey noted a somber atmosphere, where eyes often averted and prayers carried an undertone of supplication. The chapel near the birth chamber became a quiet shrine. Pilgrims visited in small numbers, leaving tokens of faith, rosary beads, small crosses, and offerings of bread and wine. The higher echelons of the church remained cautious. Theological debates continued in hushed halls, balancing doctrine with the need to maintain ecclesiastical authority. Some clerics embraced the notion that Sister Benedetta's conception was miraculous, a sign meant to inspire faith in troubled times marked by plague and war. Others argued vehemently that to accept such a claim risked undermining centuries of strict church law and morality. In the end, the Vatican's official position was one of deliberate ambiguity. Silence was preferred over scandal, discretion over confrontation. Centuries later, historians piecing together the fragments of Sister Benedetta's story confront a tapestry woven with gaps and contradictions. Discovered letters, cryptic diary entries, and local folklore offer tantalizing glimpses but no definitive answers. Questions abound. Was Sister Benedetta a victim of unseen cruelty? Was Jean a child of prophecy? Or were their lives caught in the crossfire of politics, power, and fear? Even decades after Sister Benedetta's death, the chapel near the birth chamber drew pilgrims from distant villages and towns. Unlike grand cathedrals bustling with pilgrims clamoring for miracles, this modest shrine attracted a different kind of visitor. Those who sought solace, mystery, and whispered hope. Pilgrims often left small tokens, worn rosaries, simple crosses carved from wood, scraps of parchment inscribed with prayers. Some claimed faint miracles, the healing of a persistent cough, a child's renewed strength, a heart eased from sorrow. These stories, passed down quietly among locals, contributed to a living folklore that kept the memory of Sister Benedetta and her child alive, even as official church records fell silent. The last years of Sister Benedetta's life remain almost entirely undocumented. What is known comes mostly from brief notes left by the monks who visited her hermitage and cared for her in her final illness. One such monk, Father Laurent, wrote in a letter to a colleague, She spoke rarely, but when she did, her words carried the weight of centuries. She said that the truth she carried was not for the world to understand, but for God alone to judge. She died quietly, surrounded by prayers and the faint scent of burning herbs. No public funeral was held, and her burial place remains unknown, adding another layer of mystery to her story. Jean's journey beyond childhood is a story mostly lost to time, yet some scattered records provide glimpses. According to a few documents found in the archives of a monastery in the Loire Valley, a man named Jean, bearing the same crescent-shaped mark, became a novice monk there in his late teens. His presence was noted with curiosity and respect, though his origins were never discussed openly. He lived a quiet life of study and contemplation, excelling in manuscript illumination, a skill some say was inherited from his mother. Yet even among monks, Jean was an enigma, reserved, contemplative, and burdened by the unspoken past. The tale of Sister Benedetta and Jean continues to captivate historians, theologians, and seekers of the strange and sacred. Was this an ancient miracle hidden by fear and politics? Was it a story of human suffering, love, and secrecy? Or something more? The Abbey of St. Cecile still stands, weathered but proud, holding within its walls centuries of whispered secrets and unanswered questions. As we close this chapter of history, we are left with questions that history itself cannot fully answer. What does it mean to hold a secret so profound it shapes the lives of many? How do faith and doubt coexist in the hearts of those who lived through such times? And what echoes do these stories leave for us today? Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of history's quietest mysteries. If you enjoyed this story and want to explore more lost tales, forgotten legends, and the strange corners of our past, please subscribe and stay with us. Until next time, keep wondering.